Good afternoon and welcome to SnapTech IT's monthly webinar. My name is Ted Hulsey. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for SnapTech IT and your host for today's event. Thanks for joining in for the live session. This webinar will be recorded and circulated to all registrants and posted to our YouTube channel. The topic for today is 7 key steps to securing remote workers. Today I am joined by co-founder and president Sean Brown. Sean, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Ted. It's good to see you. It's been a while since I've been on one of these, so this is great. Happy to be back.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to today's topic. Let's look at the agenda. We always spend just about a minute letting everybody know a little bit about us, just at the top. But the core of today's topic is talking about the unique challenges to securing remote workers. And steps you can either take as an organization if you're managing your IT yourself, or if you're partnering with a managed service provider, what sort of expectations you should have on best practices and things you should be doing. And then we'll address your questions and have discussions. So I do encourage everyone as we go along to certainly ask questions. A little bit about us, SnapTech IT, we are a security-first managed service provider with offices in Atlanta, Phoenix, and San Francisco, California. We really serve clients in 2 different ways. For smaller organizations that don't have any IT staff or any IT department, we provide fully managed outsourced IT services. And for larger organizations where you may have an IT director or an IT team, we also provide co-managed IT services where we're supplementing the skills and talents and resources of an internal IT team. So we handle client engagements in both of those different formats. So that's a little bit just about us. What we're going to do is drill in today, and Sean and I are going to take this kind of tag team this content. So at each step in the webinar, I'm going to talk about the problems we see with our clients or with prospective clients, with organizations. And then Sean is going to talk about how we come alongside organizations who become our clients and help them. And these are what we would consider best practices. So whether you're working with us or not, hopefully there's a lot of information and insight you can take from these best practices. And whether you're working with us or not, there's hopefully some educational content here for you to put in place in your own organization to raise the bar on cybersecurity. The other comment I'll make is the core of today's topic is really the unique challenges that have been created by the dramatic growth in remote work. We've had teleworking for 20 years, but the pandemic really turbocharged the amount of remote work that's going on. Today, I think it's pretty fair to say that companies, geography and real estate footprint is a far less consideration to a lot of organizations. People are hiring people all over the country, all over the world to get work done. And people have really, companies of all sizes have embraced remote work. And what I will say is a lot of the challenges we're talking about in today's webinar, you could have a single company with a single headquarters where everybody's coming into the office and have all these problems. I think what we're seeing, however, is a lot of these challenges that the organizations are facing and their employees are facing, these problems are magnified by organizations that are embracing remote work. Because oftentimes organizations are growing quickly or they're embracing remote work and adding new employees that are remote, and these problems get compounded in complexity. So just wanted to kind of set the stage with that as a comment. But let's kind of get into it and let's talk about challenge number 1. And really, working on these slides last week, I mean, literally, like the inspiration for so much of the content that's in these slides are literally sales engagements we are having with prospective clients yesterday, last week, Thursday, Wednesday, last week. Literally organizations where we've just come in and we've done a IT discovery and cybersecurity risk assessment, and we're finding a lot of these challenges. So this is like real world, on the ground challenges that we're seeing every day with prospective clients. The first one is bring your own device computers. there are lots and lots of small companies that are growing quickly. You have ambitious entrepreneurs running the companies. They've got the tiger by the tail in terms of growth. They're growing their companies, but they don't really fathom how dangerous it is to be running your company with exclusively employee-owned, personally owned computers. I mean, the beauty of software as a service and the fact that so many applications can be accessed from a simple web browser today encourages people to put in place some bad habits and bad practices, in our opinion. And so there are a lot of organizations where they'll hire an employee and they'll let them be doing company work from an employee-owned computer. And that can create a whole host of challenges. We see this in fast growth SMB companies where I would say they're kind of getting over their skis a little bit because they're growing too fast and they're not really addressing this reality. And the reality is, even if you have some security measures in place, it's really hard to have control over a computing environment if you're not deploying company-owned computers. So Sean, talk to the audience a little bit about the best practices we put in place and some of the things where we believe in this area.
Yeah, and Ted, thanks for bringing up the fact that this is actually real world stuff that we're seeing, because just as you mentioned, I mean, we were talking to a prospect just a couple of weeks ago, and this is the exact, issue that they're trying to solve. And I know one of our other challenges we'll kind of talk about some of the other kind of downstream effects that BYOD kind of computers have. But so, our solution and the things that we always recommend, 100% company-owned machines. In fact, we have our own kind of internal IT policy that our team is not allowed to do any SnapTech work unless it is on a company-owned machine, just because we can't. I don't know where that machine has been. I can't protect that machine. With a BYOD machine, a lot of times, employees don't want you to install a bunch of security tools on it because they want to have full control over their own kind of personal computer, which makes a ton of sense. So we recommend just 100% company-owned machines. It solves a lot of potential security risk and headaches kind of down the road. You're also able to kind of control the software, data, and security, and I know we're going to talk about those and some challenges later on. And quite frankly, in some of the industries that we deal with, such as the defense industrial base, financial, legal, things like that, you are really not supposed to allow your employees to work on BYOD machines. Just from a compliance standpoint, you're not really supposed to be doing that. So good stuff there. Yep.
Yeah, and this really applies for Macs or Windows machines. Some other things. I mean, in terms of Windows machines, we always recommend Windows Pro and machines that have the vPro chip, because there's a whole host of remote support and security capabilities we can put in place when you have the right company-owned machines and the right business class, enterprise class laptops.
Right. Yep. Completely agree.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Challenge number 2. And again, some of this stuff you might be like, oh, this is kind of basic. Well, we're going from basic to more advanced. And we're talking, we advertised this webinar as 7 steps you can take. We're really going to give you 9. We probably could have come up with another 6, but we thought we'd stop at 9 just to manage time. So we're going from basic to advanced. But another thing we commonly see is that companies will have their users set up, even if they're on corporate machines. So this is kind of like, let's go to the next layer. You've got company-owned machines, but they're not set up correctly. And what we often see is that the employees are set up as local admins on their machine. And from a convenience perspective, why do you do that? Well, you do that because people can be independent. They can install all the software tools they need to do their job. The challenge is when you have users who have local admin access on their machine, it's really a hacker's dream, because they have full control of the machine. You can do all sorts of nefarious reconfigurations to the Windows operating system and really hide that somebody else has control of the machine. In the hacking community or cybersecurity community, that's called persistence, where a threat actor gets control of a machine And then often when they have control of a machine, they're going to try to move laterally within inside of an organization. So if you can just get a toehold on a single machine because that machine had local admin access, you then try to like basically move laterally from maybe a less valuable machine to the servers or to the rest of the infrastructure. And it's really a hacker's dream. So Sean, what do we do when we see this sort of situation? We bring on a client and we implement best practices.
Yeah. So the first thing we're going to do is remove local admin access. So that's just pretty much a non-starter, because like you said, with local admin access, the employee or team member has the rights to pretty much do whatever they want to on that machine. And so does an attacker that happened to get on that machine as well. So we recommend removing local admin rights. Now, one of the challenges that we have whenever we remove local admin rights and go to kind of this least privilege model, and there are certain things that you kind of need admin level access to be able to do on the machine. And you don't want to always have to contact, IT to be able to do some simple things like an example that I just saw today. I was switching out my network card and disabling it. And if you're not a local admin, you're not allowed to adjust any of your network settings. Well, we use a tool that allows us to do kind of elevated access or privileged access management to give certain administrative rights on a machine without making them an admin on the machine. So that's one of our best practices that we do in this kind of least privilege, zero trust kind of approach that we take. The other thing that we do is to kind of create this application whitelist, if you will, meaning if there are certain applications from a company and corporate standpoint that are approved to be installed on the machine, we can enable end users to be able to add approved software, but everything else is completely denied. So that's kind of what we mean there with this kind of reduced friction with application kind of allow list and that auto elevate technology. So giving them the ability to install a printer if they need to, because that's an admin level task, we're able to kind of auto elevate that and be able to provide them the level of kind of local kind of administrative access that they might need, but not giving them local admin access.
That's right. That's right. So let's go to challenge number 3. And again, this is something, again, you could have company-owned machines, but what we often find is that there is inadequate identity management. And identity management, as the world becomes more and more distributed, as computers move from outside that traditional corporate perimeter to a highly distributed computing environment, really at the end of at the beginning of the day, really, cybersecurity is all about managing identity and knowing that the person who's trying to access an application or a resource is who they say they are. And we come across organizations all the time, they're just growing like crazy, and they just have not matured to the point where they're doing proper identity management. And then it gets worse when you've got people who are remote, because then you really don't know who's accessing your applications, and it can get out of hand very quickly. Again, it's another hacker's dream. Traditionally, this technology was managed on premises, like at a headquarters location where you would have an Active Directory database. But, a lot of servers have gone to the cloud. People are becoming more distributed. And so the question is in a more distributed world today, how do you leverage identity management and directory services in a more cloud-centric way? So Sean, talk to us a little bit about what we do there.
Yeah, and I'll just tell a quick story. We started working with a company, I think they have about 25 or so employees, about 2 months ago, and this is the exact situation they were in. They had company-owned machines. I can't remember if they had local admins or not, but they had company-owned machines, but they had no kind of identity, kind of an access management solution. So every one of their users had a local login account to the machine, which poses a number of kind of security concerns and, quite frankly, manageability. We never like when employees leave an organization. However, in a situation where there's no identity and access management, the company has no way of shutting off access to be able to log on to the machine if we don't have a solution like this in place. Now, we can go disable SaaS applications and Office 365 and things like that, but we had no ability at this company that we just brought on to be able to go shut off access unless we put in something like an identity management solution. So we're big fans and big partners with Microsoft. So we leverage kind of Azure's Active Directory. I think they just recently renamed it, and I can't remember what the new Microsoft marketing term for it is now, but forever it'll be Azure Active Directory for me. So the great thing about that is we now have a central management solution. So as we have distributed employees, all over our city or all over the country, we have the ability to grant permission and remove permission from the cloud, which is awesome. We can also enforce multi-factor authentication. And just it provides an easier way to reset passwords and provide manageability and be able to deploy software and tools and things and just provide an overall better user experience and a better management experience for the employee and for the organization.
Yeah, and I guess when we bring on a new client, it's usually about a 2-week process, and we usually have what we call an onboarding project. And a lot of these sorts of like fundamental basic things are things we get at in that first 2 weeks of a business relationship with a new client, where we just, these sorts of things, these are absolutely mandatory things we've got to get in place to just stabilize the cybersecurity situation at an organization before we even talk about some of the more higher or more advanced cybersecurity approaches. So,
right.
Very closely related to the prior 3 challenges is, you could have situations where they have some of these bases covered, but they still are allowing users to really install anything they want on their machine. This is very closely to having local admin privileges, but a lot of organizations have really liberal, let's call it liberal, or in the headline of the slide here, I call it Wild West, very liberal privileges around installing applications. And again, the same challenge we talked with local admin, it's like, if the user can install anything, then hackers can install anything, or malware to the computer looks just like a legitimate application being installed, but it can be the beginning of a ransomware infection. And so closely related to what we talked about with local admin and how we manage that, we put in place something called application control and change management. Talk to us a little bit about that, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I think Microsoft did whenever they created Windows was they made it this allow everything kind of approach. So security was really not something that they factored in whenever they were designing that operating system. And so if you have access, or in some cases, even if you don't have access, you're still able to kind of install pretty much whatever application you want on a machine. And so for us, our solution is we implement this kind of technology that we refer to as a zero trust approach, meaning instead of Windows being completely open and you can go install whatever you want to, we're going to catalog and create a list of allowed applications for your environment. And that's not just applications, but that's also like plugins and things like that you might install into your browser. And so we'll create a catalog of those and work with the organization to create an allow list. And then anything that's on the allow list is able to be installed inside the environment. Anything that's not on the allow list is 100% denied, meaning ransomware, for example, is completely denied because it will never be on our allow list because we specifically, target and allow specific applications or plugins. And so that's what we mean by this kind of application control and kind of creating this allow list. Change management is another big thing that we do internally that I highly recommend for everybody, which is anytime you're going to make a significant change in the environment, we need to do some form of an approval. And so for us, we've got a system built inside our organization that anytime we need to do a major application upgrade or a change inside the environment, we're going to run it through our internal change management system and not only get our kind of VCIO's approval on it, but also the client's kind of main point of contact's approval on those kinds of changes as well, because we never want to install applications not fully understanding what they completely do, because sometimes they could be malicious in nature.
Right, or introduce data leakage or data theft risks.
Yeah,
or even.
So that's a great point, and we saw this, and I heard about this just a couple of months ago, where attackers are now using, traditional like backup technologies and installing readily available real backup technologies that you might use to back up files to the cloud, like Carbonite or one of those systems. An antivirus is never going to block some tool like that that's a readily available commercial application that does backups, but an attacker could install it on your environment and be exfiltrating tons of data out of your environment, and there's no antivirus or no security tool in the world that's going to stop that because it looks like a legitimate application.
Right. And I think this whole like paradigm, I think, freaks people out a little bit, because if they've come from a more liberal Wild West type approach to things, because they're like, oh, how are people going to get their job done? And the reality is that the way we've set up systems and processes with our clients so that this process can be, in some cases, almost instantaneous, the approvals, or super fast, or at least well understood. That it's not like if you have a principle of least privilege or zero trust, it's not like you're going to stop changing. You're going to always be changing. You're going to be always evolving that allow list, but it needs to be done in a controlled way, and the right sign-offs need to happen. And so we use software tools to make it so that it's very efficient. That a ticket gets generated, the ticket gets put in front of the right person who approves it. And then that approval, then that automatically gets pushed to the machine, and they're given an alert to say, hey, go ahead and install the application you want. So It's really about managing change rather than having a Wild West approach, Okay, let's go to challenge number 5. Okay, another big thing that, again, this is really about like remote workers. I mean, today, if you just look at the chart of the percentage of machines that are laptops, highly functional mobile computing devices, it just continues to inch up because there's just far more utility for the user to have a laptop where they can click into a docking station at the office, take the machine with them to their home office, plug in to their multiple monitors set up at home, and be productive wherever they go. Just the number of laptops continues to go up and up and up. And the challenge is that there is technology that allows you to implement full disk encryption on those machines, but it's often not implemented. So we see we see organizations where they have these laptop computers that have like a ton of corporate data, and sometimes private health information, client information, financial information about your clients on these laptop computers. And if the laptop is lost or stolen, you could have a real problem if a sophisticated actor or cyber criminal gets a hold of that machine if that disk isn't encrypted. So, Sean, talk to us a little bit about what we do and to protect against those sorts of challenges.
Well, first of all, I don't know, that doesn't look like my car, but I do have to tell the story. About a year, I guess it was maybe a year and a half ago, I'm down in Atlanta. So I live just north of Atlanta. I'm down in Atlanta having dinner with somebody. I went right after work. My laptop is in the back of my SUV, completely covered with a coat, and someone smashed my back window, stole my laptop, stole the wallet. However, we have full disk encryption. We use Sophos Central device encryption. And so you would have to get through my PIN, my password, and then my whole entire disk is encrypted. If it wasn't encrypted and you didn't have a solution like this in place, any 10-year-old with a hard drive reading disk and just put that laptop disk into it and read every bit of data off of your laptop. So highly recommend, if you've got mobile devices, like laptops, that we encrypt those. And so, like I said, we use Sophos Central device encryption. Provides a great kind of overall management tool for us to be able to easily manage the encryption across your entire fleet of laptops. So.
Okay, cool. Great story, real life example, and real life example where the technology made it so we weren't losing sleep that day.
That's right.
Just a couple comments for everybody. I encourage you, if you have questions on any of these topics, go ahead and submit them in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll try to address them as we go or at the end. The second thing is, if you arrived a couple of minutes late, we will be sending you a link to the downloadable version of this webinar if you missed, say, the first 5 or 10 minutes. And we always post all of our webinars to our YouTube channel, so you can go and listen in on demand, or if you have a colleague who you'd like to share this with because it's good information, say for a fellow person of the leadership team, feel free to go check us out on the YouTube channel. So let's go to challenge number 6. So again, we're going from kind of like basic stuff to more advanced topics here. And let's talk about where we are today with traditional antivirus. Antivirus has been around, John McAfee has passed away. That's how long antivirus has been around. So, 25, 30 years, we've had, antivirus as a tool to combat various forms of malware and viruses on machines. The challenge with traditional antivirus is they are signature based. I mean, basically how they work, there's a signature database in the software. That signature database is continuously talking to the cloud and getting updated with signatures of known threats. The challenge with that is that the hackers know this, the cyber criminals know this, and there's all sorts of opportunities to have kind of zero-day type threats where they innovate new ways to exploit software, and or, like Sean mentioned earlier, use conventional tools to do unconventional things. I mean, to use conventional software tools that would normally not be detected by antivirus and use them in nefarious ways to either steal data or to compromise a machine or to, do their dirty tricks in secret. And so that's the kind of the challenge with traditional antivirus. If you're only relying on those traditional ways of doing it, you're really missing out on the full scope of what's possible. So talk to us a little bit about managed detection and response and what that allows you to do.
Yeah, so think of that as kind of, antivirus on steroids that has built-in, sophistication, logic, and can detect anomalies. So an example may be with an MDR type approach, you may have data exfiltration going out to a known bad IP address. Well, the new version of this kind of MDR is able to understand that this is a potential, through threat intelligence and data, that this is a potential dangerous, IP address, or this is an IP address that's in Russia or Turkey or someplace that you normally wouldn't see data being exfiltrated to, or the vice versa, someone trying to get in from an IP address that's from another country like that. They're able to kind of pick up and detect and monitor not just signature-based kind of threats, but also just intelligence-based kind of anomalies and things that are happening in the environment. So that's kind of the next generation, and what we kind of mean by this whole kind of managed detection and response is, kind of having not only systems and artificial intelligence kind of watching and looking for this stuff, but in a lot of cases, we've got a SOC team, a security operations center team, analysts looking for these kind of anomalies and looking for these kinds of things that are happening in the environment to be able to generate alerts, um, to be able to stop breaches quicker than before. Yeah.
Yeah, and to take action. I mean, I think
And to take action. That's right.
I mean, there's some cybersecurity experts. You hear them talk, and they're like, part of cybersecurity today is presuming breach. You have to presume that at some point some employee is going to click on something and maybe have been not managing their passwords correctly, and they're going to be breached. And so the challenge is, are you able to rapidly detect that and then isolate it and then take action? And managed detection and response is kind of like, if you think about traditional antivirus as kind of like the locks on the door to your house, managed detection and response is kind of like the motion detector inside your alarm system that is determining, well, there's actually some stranger walking through your living room, you need to take action. So a huge part of MDR is giving either your MSP like us or your IT department the ability to rapidly take action and isolate the cyber criminal before they do severe damage.
And then, so let me just, I'll tell a quick kind of use case too for, so Sophos, who is a big security partner of ours, the MDR kind of solution that we're kind of talking about is the Sophos solution. Sophos has this concept of synchronized security, where we've got multiple security tools that are working together. So an example of that would be, let's say I've got my Sophos Central device encryption, and I've got a Sophos firewall, Sophos access point, and my managed detection and response endpoint protection. Endpoint picks up that I've got something malicious potentially on my machine. The access point would remove me from being able to access anything on the network. The firewall would block all of my traffic going out. The encryption keys would be locked. Once the endpoint, the MDR solution, determined that it was clean and had cleaned the potential infection, it would reissue all of my encryption keys for my laptop. The access point would let me back onto the local network, and the firewall would then let me back out to the internet. Now, that doesn't work the exact same way when you're at home because the access point and the firewall are not there. However, the encryption part and the endpoint would all work the exact same way. So anyway, cool kind of next gen antivirus and how we're starting to tie some of these solutions together via the synchronized solution concept that Sophos has.
Awesome. Synchronized security. Awesome. Okay, home stretch here. Items, challenge 7, 8, 9. So another huge challenge that organizations face, especially in a more distributed operating format, is how do you govern your data? I think if you've done kind of like steps 1 through 6, you're at least halfway there, in terms of mitigating some of the challenges that we've covered today. But another huge challenge that organizations face is they are maybe using only the most basic file collaboration capabilities in the Microsoft suite, or you see in some organizations they've got a combination. They've got the marketing departments on Dropbox, and the IT department is telling everybody else to use OneDrive, and they're using different tools. And then people are saving content to their desktop, and is the local machine actually being backed up, and there's high value content being saved locally on the machine, but not to a server, not to a file collaboration platform. This is super, super common today, that there's data spread all over the place. And it's a huge risk because employees could steal data. Rogue employees might be terminated and make off with data. Again, back to the whole hey, maybe somebody has their machine stolen while they're logged in, and there's a bunch of stuff that people can get to on their machine while they're logged in. So data governance is a big concern, and the solution we really recommend is a modernized cloud-based file collaboration system. Sean, tell us about how that could help a lot of these challenges.
Yeah, just also kind of to the issue. I think a lot of companies still have local on-prem kind of file servers. And if I'm working remotely, the only way to gain access to those, or one of the more prominent ways, is to create a virtual private network. And so if I'm working at home, I got to get logged in through the VPN, that kind of virtual private network. And then once I get logged in, sometimes there's slowness involved with that. And then I can kind of navigate this kind of file server. And then Ted, to your point, because that's such a pain, I'm probably saving local, corporate documents locally on my desktop or locally on my machine that causes all kinds of problems, especially when you go to try to locate some of that stuff, or if you got a hard drive that crashed or got stolen or whatever the situation is. So, we recommend Ignite. It's a cloud-based, really secure kind of cloud-based file system that has a number of great, not only security, but just kind of workability and collaboration tools kind of built into it. Like Ted and I could collaborate and work on a PowerPoint or a Word document together, just right out of Ignite, which is really great. I can't tell you how many times I use the mobile app to be able to pull up and kind of reference documents. So regardless of wherever I am, I just open my laptop and my file drive is right there. As long as I'm connected to the internet, I have full, complete access to our entire file system that's stored up on Ignite. And so that whole work anywhere from any device securely is, just the usability of it, the ability to share documents out of this is super easy, super convenient, and super secure.
Yeah, and I would just to chime in, I mean, the thing, I love Ignite for all the reasons you just shared, but the thing that I think is just absolutely super slick is their integration with the Microsoft suite is really second to none. I mean, on an iPhone or an Android device or an iPad, you can go from accessing, like, we have a little screenshot there of a mobile phone or of an iPhone, and you can go from like accessing all of your corporate files right into Microsoft Word or Excel and use your mobile device or like an iPad to, actually work on documents in the Microsoft mobile version of the app. So the Ignite has a really seamless integration with either the Microsoft suite running locally on your machine, or on the mobile device, or on the web-based version of the Microsoft apps, like the Microsoft Excel for the web, which is a way that a lot of people like to work in a lot of these apps more and more today. So it's really, you have all the best of both worlds. You have all of your files super secure, but you also give users the ability to really work anywhere. So, okay, well, let's talk about a different challenge.
So yes. Ted, I do see a question that came in.
Okay.
We want to kind of address it because it is kind of about Ignite.
Okay.
Or we can save it to the end, whatever you prefer.
No, let's grab it. I need to pop it out. Okay, so Ryan asks, how do you ensure proper hardening of the Ignite cloud storage areas, and why is this better than OneDrive or Microsoft 365?
Yeah. So the hardening question with Ignite, I can tell you, they're one of our main vendors. We go through an annual SOC 2 audit every year. Part of that audit requires us to do vendor due diligence. So we're always, asking Ignite and all of our kind of main technology partners for their cybersecurity and what they're doing. A lot of times we'll get back another SOC audit from, like, Ignite gives us their copy of their SOC audit every year. So that's one of the ways that we do it. I will tell you that they're also certified for Department of Defense. And so pretty high level of security that's required to be CMMC compliant whenever it comes to data. The other thing that I really like about Ignite is in their auditing logs and some of the sophistication that they have around just auditing what's happening with those documents. So that kind of hopefully addresses, Ryan, your questions around kind of the security of that. When it comes to OneDrive and SharePoint, some of the challenges that we have seen, if you start getting a pretty large SharePoint deployment, the synchronization and how that syncs and tries to keep files updated locally it starts running into a little bit of a challenge. That sync tool is not the best in the world. And so we have seen when you start getting up into 8, 9, a terabyte of data, the way that SharePoint sync tool works is it wants to try to sync everything across all of so from the cloud down to your local machine. And so we had a pretty big challenge with this with a client about a year ago, trying to make their large amount of data set, especially when you're talking about working with large files, sync properly and stay up to date. We had all kinds of challenges with that. That was a real struggle. Now, I don't mind using OneDrive. And in fact, a lot of times we'll use OneDrive not for a main repository, just because it's really hard. You'd have to almost share individual files. So it's not really set up like a file system. OneDrive is really built to have like personal files, but we'll use it to back up my documents and things like that are on laptops, favorites, my documents, desktops, because we know end users are always going to just store things there, even though we tell them not to. And so that's a little trick that we do to leverage that space and data storage that you're already getting with your 365 licensing to kind of back up, if you will, loosely, I call it loosely back up, but data over to OneDrive. So we do leverage that, but we do not leverage it for a main kind of replacement of a file server. So Ryan, hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, and Ryan jumped in with a follow-up. He says, how do you avoid having to use both Microsoft Cloud file collaboration and Ignite?
And so that's kind of what I mean. We use OneDrive for that, just for kind of local kind of laptop backups. Like I said, favorites, my documents, desktop, stuff like that, where I know people are going to store stuff that we tell them not to put there. And then we use Ignite for that main kind of file server.
Yeah, and I would say that people shouldn't a key theme in today's thing is like, don't let users like run wild and and do whatever they want. And a huge part, I think, on file collaboration is setting a standard on where corporate content lives, both at like the departmental level, at the organization level, and in user behavior. Because for example, the thing you can do is you can block certain applications from, of course, being installed on people's machines. So if you're using Ignite, you do not allow Dropbox to be installed on your corporate machines, as an example. But a huge part of this is establishing, hey, this is where corporate content lives. And if it happens to be Ignite, you just build those habits as an organization and internal standards, and you don't let people go off the reservation, if you will, on that sort of stuff. I mean, as a manager, you're like, why are you storing these contents there? So a huge part of that is establishing an internal standard and sticking to it. But you're right to point out that there are lots of little corner cases. So a lot of this stuff is pretty complicated to stay on top of.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about backing up the Microsoft 365 suite or SaaS applications in general. So, today, I don't know, I haven't looked at the stats very recently, but the number of organizations that are running traditional on-premises Microsoft Exchange is going close to, it's going down and down and down. So it's a lot lower today. So most organizations have migrated to either Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. I think the last time I looked at the market share figures, Microsoft has 90% of the market and Google has 10% of the market. But most mail, has moved to cloud-based SaaS applications. The reality is a lot of users don't realize that just because the servers and the infrastructure is all moved from your own on-premises data center to a hosted SaaS application by the two biggest technology companies in the world, Google and Microsoft, doesn't mean that the actual content in your tenant environment is actually backed up. So that has a whole host of implications. I mean, I think traditionally, if you had an Exchange server, you always had a backup of the Exchange environment for all the different reasons you could think of: employees leaving, legal disputes, employee disputes that come down the road, just governing your content. There's tons and tons of documents that after somebody leaves, you want to be able to get access to. So there's tons and tons of reasons for backups and archives. But today, with Microsoft 365, if something gets deleted and the retention policies are set to the standard retention policy in the Microsoft world, that content, that user account or those emails, they're gone in 30 days forever. And Microsoft has no obligation to back up that content beyond its retention period in the application. So talk to us about what we do about that, Sean.
Yeah, so we leverage Datto SaaS protection for this. So it's a backup of 365. It also does Google as well, but it does back up, email, calendars, everything that you would kind of think of being in your Outlook, if you will. Backs up Teams and documents that get put into Teams. If you're leveraging SharePoint, it'll back up SharePoint as well as OneDrive. Completely HIPAA and it meets all the requirements for all of the different kind of compliance and regulations as well. And I believe it backs it up kind of 3 times a day, I think is what the default is. But we see this, the biggest use case for this is accidental deletion, especially if we've got documents that are stored, somewhere in Teams or in OneDrive or SharePoint, if you happen to be using that, where people, delete it. They don't even know they deleted it. They may have done it on accident, or we have people that, have left the company, and as they are out the door, they're deleting all of their data, and you don't realize it until it's already past the retention period. So for a couple of bucks, kind of a mailbox a month, having this insurance in place is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, a couple other examples to elaborate on what you just mentioned, Sean. I mean, I think, one of the beauties of the Microsoft 365 platform is it's a platform, and there are dozens of applications that you get with your subscription. The reality is it's not always clear to the users or to the organizations or decision makers like how that data is being saved. So like a lot of like if you record, for example, if you record a Teams meeting, it ends up in Microsoft Stream, but there's like a retention policy in place that will age out that content, and then that content can be deleted. So there's all these the good news is that Microsoft has innovated, and a lot of these apps talk to each other and are integrated, and a lot of them leverage SharePoint, and a lot of this content gets saved, but nobody really understands what's happening under the covers, and so stuff's getting deleted and going missing all the time. So this is where these backups come in handy.
Greg and Ryan both have good questions here about Backupify and Datto SaaS protection. Well, good news is they have this great marketing department that they thought it would be really cool to rename Backupify Datto SaaS protection. So same product, one and the same. Marketing got a hold of it and changed the name.
Mission accomplished. Marketing, go for it.
Just like Microsoft.
Anyway, yeah. So two questions about Backupify. So Datto SaaS is Backupify. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Let's go to our very last topic. And the reality is I guess it's a debate whether users are the first line of defense or the last line of defense. But so much of what we've talked about today, you can implement all of these best practices, but at the end of the day, users can make mistakes. Users can be the weak link. And it's really important to build a culture of security. And a lot of that's like attitude and leadership in an organization, but a lot of it's like the brass tacks of making sure people understand how cyber criminals work, all of their dirty tricks, and how to stay one step ahead of all of these pitfalls that that are laid for us every day in our work. So we need to build human firewalls. And Sean, tell us about how we get after that problem.
Yeah, so you used a term that I really like. It's about building a culture of security. And so it's not about just, online training videos. It's about how do we reinforce and build this kind of full culture of security so that we have everybody in the organization thinking that they're part of the security of the entire organization. So we right now leverage an awareness training program that we kind of designed and built with a company called KnowBe4. It, it does a number of different things. So not only does it have kind of online training videos, so think 10 to 15 minute little training videos with quizzes to ensure that our team is going through that. There is a kind of learning management system, LMS system, kind of built on the back end of it. So we've got reporting and can kind of tell who has taken their training and who hasn't. The other component that we do with this is, we highly recommend that you test your employees and try to actively phish them, if you will. So trying to send them fake emails to see if they will, click on links or download attachments and enable macros. And so there's lots of tests and relevant information that we kind of send on a monthly. We recommend you do that to them monthly. In fact, full disclosure, I got an email probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 months ago from Dunkin' Donuts. And I immediately went to the unsubscribe button because I'm like, God, I do not want a bunch of Dunkin' Donut emails lighting me up for the next 6 months. But it was a phishing attempt. And so I failed the phishing test because I clicked on unsubscribe. So be careful of the unsubscribe buttons because they could be tricks as well, apparently. The other thing that we like to do is we send this weekly kind of just kind of security tips of like recent activities or recent kind of tricks that people are doing. Again, we're trying to build this kind of culture of security. And then monthly, we send the security kind of tips. Think of it as kind of security newsletters. And the whole point of that is to try to rebuild and enforce this kind of culture of security that you mentioned earlier, Ted. So that's kind of how we kind of think about doing kind of a full end user kind of awareness. As we do training, we reinforce with content, and then we test the user.
Right. And I think, if you think about it, I mean, I think for those of us who have been around a while in corporate America, we've all been, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we all got dragged into a conference room, theater style seating where we got talked to about security best practices. And today, look at our world, half of our workforce might be remote, and on a permanent basis. And so you really need to embrace these new training modalities, if you will, and ways of leveraging micro learning and frequency to keep up this dialogue with your staff about security best practices and how to stay one step ahead of these cyber criminals. So, all right. So we've got time for a couple more questions, but before we get there, just a little bit about how we work with prospective clients and even existing clients, because we will periodically do cybersecurity assessments on existing clients on an ongoing basis. But really, what we want to do is just say, look, if anything here caught your eye, or if your organization is struggling with any of these challenges, maybe partnering with a managed service provider is a potential option for your organization. And one thing that we do with everybody that we get to meet out there, every organization, is we always try to start out with an IT discovery and cybersecurity risk assessment. We have like small, medium, large varieties of assessments depending on the size and complexity of the organization. So even if you're a smaller company, we have an assessment approach that will fit the complexity of your IT environment. And for us, it's always where we want to start the conversation. Let's stop and take stock of where we are, figure out, what are the things you're doing today? What are the things you're doing right? What are the areas where you probably could improve? Where is there infrastructure that's long in the tooth and needs to be updated? Are there any red flags? Are there any like glaringly urgent things you need to get after? We try to get at all of that in an assessment. And it's really foundational to how we go about helping organizations evolve their IT and cybersecurity posture and help really raise the bar on cybersecurity in general. And this applies whether you're an organization with a more traditional structure, with a headquarters and everybody coming to the office, or you're highly distributed. This sort of assessment is relevant for either sorts of engagement. So, Sean, any comments on this process?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay, cool. Let's go to, so we have time for a few more questions. So let's see here. Um, a question from Ryan. If you're currently a managed customer, how do you remain independent? That's a good question, Ryan. So Sean, you want to tackle that one?
No, I'm going to let you take that one. No, I'm kidding. So that's a great question, Ryan. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're asking the question, and we may be going and looking for the evidence. But specifically in your case, where I know we're working with internal IT, we're relying too on you guys as we ask these questions. And in fact, you're going to start seeing this a little more as we kind of roll out this new kind of part of our process that we were just looking at a minute ago was these quarterly business reviews. And so the idea and concept that we're going to be working on as we kind of continue to enhance our quarterly business review process with you is to review where we currently are sitting in whatever version of that risk assessment that we did with you. And if it's been a while, we're going to go back and redo a risk assessment with you, looking at the information that we know is in place and what is not in place. Collaborating with you to make sure we've got our answers, correctly and that they're valid. Because we want to be able to present that and go, here's where we are, and now here are some recommendations or the next kind of critical solutions that we think need to be put in place to mitigate those risks. And then each quarter, as we do our quarterly business reviews, we'll do kind of an update to that risk assessment, and we'll watch our scores improve over time. So that's kind of how our new approach is going to be as we start rolling out these new kind of QBRs. So Ryan, look forward to those coming here in the near future.
Yeah, and then there are other kind of security frameworks or compliance levels like SOC 2, where you need to bring in third-party auditors as a way to keep everybody honest, right, so to speak, and in the process. And like in the defense contracting space, CMMC, if you're at a certain level of sophistication as an organization, you can't just self-attest to your posture. You have to actually bring in a third-party assessor to validate things. So all of the above we're getting after with existing clients and new prospective clients. So I think we're pretty much, thanks very much for the great questions we got as we went along. We like to start on time and end on time on this webinar program. I want to highlight next month's webinar. We're going to do a more of a verticalized approach so understanding the new securities and exchange cybersecurity requirements for investment advisors in 2023. So that may not be your bag, but if you're in the financial vertical or you're curious about the topic, there are some very interesting compliance requirements that the SEC is putting in front of investment advisors. And so we'll be talking about those in particular next month. And we thank you guys very much for joining us for this month's webinar. And look for all of our content that's like this on our YouTube channel. And thanks a lot for joining us live today. And Sean, thanks a lot for really engaging and interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to seeing you on a future SnapTech IT monthly webinar. Take care now. See you.